Question 1. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee who, while responding to a noise complaint, observes what appears to be illegal contraband in plain view inside a residence through an open door, and hears sounds suggesting a possible ongoing disturbance within? Option A. Attempt to speak with the residents through the open door to ascertain the nature of the disturbance and inquire about the contraband before deciding on further action. Option B. Enter the residence immediately to investigate the sounds and secure the contraband, believing it to be an emergency situation requiring immediate intervention. Option C. Secure the immediate exterior of the residence to prevent anyone from entering or leaving, and immediately radio for a supervisor and detectives to respond to the scene. Option D. Document the observation of contraband and sounds in a report, but do not take any further action until a warrant is obtained, as direct entry is not permissible. Correct answer is C. Secure the immediate exterior of the residence to prevent anyone from entering or leaving, and immediately radio for a supervisor and detectives to respond to the scene. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action in a potential emergency and the requirement to adhere to established departmental procedures and legal mandates regarding evidence handling and search protocols. A trainee officer must balance immediate public safety concerns with the long-term integrity of any potential investigation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that actions taken do not compromise future legal proceedings or violate the rights of individuals. The approach that represents best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately requesting specialized units, such as detectives or a crime scene investigation team, to handle the collection of evidence. This is correct because it aligns with the Arizona revised statutes, particularly those concerning search and seizure and the preservation of evidence. By not disturbing the scene beyond what is immediately necessary for safety, the trainee officer ensures that the chain of custody for any potential evidence is maintained, and that collection is performed by personnel trained in proper forensic techniques. This minimizes the risk of contamination or improper collection, which could render evidence inadmissible in court. Furthermore, it respects the privacy rights of individuals by ensuring searches are conducted under proper legal authority and by authorized personnel. An incorrect approach would be to immediately begin collecting items that appear to be evidence without proper authorization or training. This fails to adhere to the strict protocols for evidence handling mandated by Arizona law and departmental policy, potentially compromising the integrity of the evidence and jeopardizing any subsequent prosecution. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential evidence altogether and leave the scene unsecured, prioritizing other duties over a potential crime scene. This would be a dereliction of duty and could lead to the loss of critical evidence, hindering investigations and failing to uphold public safety. Finally, attempting to conduct a full search of the premises without probable cause or a warrant, even with the intention of finding further evidence, would be a violation of constitutional rights and Arizona law, leading to legal repercussions and undermining public trust in law enforcement. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes immediate safety, followed by scene preservation and the timely notification of appropriate specialized units. This framework involves assessing the situation, identifying potential risks and evidence, and acting within the scope of their authority and training, while ensuring all actions are legally sound and procedurally correct. When in doubt, consulting with a supervisor or more experienced officer is always a prudent step. Question 2. Quality control measures reveal that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, responding to a dispatch call regarding a possible burglary in progress at a vacant warehouse, has not yet conducted a thorough assessment of potential risks before deciding on the tactical approach. Which of the following represents the most appropriate risk assessment strategy in this scenario, adhering to Arizona law enforcement standards? Option A. Initiate a systematic risk assessment by gathering all available intelligence on the location and potential occupants, considering environmental factors, and planning a phased approach to entry and investigation, prioritizing officer and public safety. Option B. Delay any response until a detailed forensic analysis of the surrounding area can be completed, even if it means significant time elapses. Option C. Proceed with a solo, rapid entry into the warehouse to quickly apprehend any potential suspects, relying on individual skill and speed. Option D. Immediately request a SWAT team deployment and establish a perimeter, assuming the highest level of threat without further preliminary assessment. The correct answer is A. Initiate a systematic risk assessment by gathering all available intelligence on the location and potential occupants, considering environmental factors, and planning a phased approach to entry and investigation, prioritizing officer and public safety. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an officer trainee to balance immediate operational needs with the long-term implications of their actions on public trust and departmental integrity. The pressure to respond quickly to a potential crime can lead to hasty decisions that may not align with established risk assessment protocols. Careful judgment is required to ensure that actions are both effective in addressing the immediate situation and compliant with legal and ethical standards. The best approach involves a systematic risk assessment that prioritizes officer safety, public safety, and the preservation of evidence. This approach begins with gathering as much information as possible from the initial report and any available intelligence before making a decision on the level of response. It then involves a layered approach to intervention, starting with less intrusive methods where feasible and escalating only as necessary based on the evolving risk assessment. This aligns with the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training, ASPOST, guidelines which emphasize a proactive and informed approach to law enforcement, focusing on de-escalation and the judicious use of force, always considering the totality of the circumstances. The goal is to achieve a safe and lawful resolution while minimizing potential harm and legal repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately deploy maximum force or initiate a high-risk entry based solely on a vague report of suspicious activity. This fails to conduct a proper risk assessment, potentially escalating a minor situation into a dangerous confrontation and violating the principles of proportionality and necessity outlined in Arizona law and ASPOST guidelines regarding the use of force. Another incorrect approach is to delay response significantly to gather excessive, non-critical information, which could endanger potential victims or allow suspects to escape, thereby failing in the duty to protect and serve. Finally, an approach that bypasses established communication protocols and fails to involve appropriate specialized units when the situation warrants it demonstrates a lack of understanding of departmental procedures and a failure to leverage available resources for optimal risk mitigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Information gathering. Actively seek and analyze all available information. 2. Threat assessment. Evaluate the potential danger to officers, the public, and oneself. 3. Resource allocation. Determine the appropriate personnel and equipment needed. 4. Tactical planning. Develop a strategy that prioritizes safety and de-escalation. 5. Continuous reevaluation. Adapt the plan as the situation evolves. This framework ensures that decisions are informed, proportionate, and aligned with legal and ethical obligations. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, responding to a disturbance call, observes a small, unmarked baggie containing a white powdery substance near an individual who appears to be experiencing a medical emergency. The trainee has basic training in identifying common illicit substances, but is not a certified evidence technician. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the trainee? Option A. Secure the immediate area around the individual and the suspected contraband. Then immediately radio for a supervisor and the appropriate investigative unit to respond to the scene. Option B. Discreetly dispose of the suspected contraband to avoid complicating the medical response and the subsequent investigation. Option C. Focus solely on providing medical assistance to the individual and make a mental note of the suspected contraband without taking any immediate action to secure it. Option D. Immediately collect the suspected contraband for preliminary testing to determine its nature before addressing the individual's medical needs. The correct answer is A. Secure the immediate area around the individual and the suspected contraband. Then immediately radio for a supervisor and the appropriate investigative unit to respond to the scene. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee because it requires immediate judgment under pressure, balancing the need for swift action with adherence to departmental policy and legal statutes concerning evidence handling and public safety. The trainee must assess the risk of evidence degradation or contamination against the potential for immediate danger, all while operating within the specific legal framework of Arizona and Phoenix Police Department guidelines. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately notifying a supervisor and the relevant investigative unit. This approach is correct because it prioritizes the integrity of potential evidence by preventing unauthorized access or disturbance, which is a fundamental principle in criminal investigations governed by Arizona revised statutes and Phoenix Police Department general orders on evidence preservation. It also ensures that experienced personnel are involved in the decision-making process regarding evidence collection and the subsequent investigation, thereby minimizing the risk of procedural errors that could jeopardize a case. This proactive notification allows for the proper deployment of resources and expertise to manage the scene effectively and safely. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately collecting the suspected contraband without securing the scene or notifying a supervisor. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses critical protocols for evidence integrity. Without proper scene security, the evidence could be contaminated, tampered with, or its chain of custody compromised, potentially rendering it inadmissible in court under Arizona rules of evidence. Furthermore, acting unilaterally without supervisory input or specialized investigative support increases the risk of misidentification of the substance or improper handling procedures. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the suspected contraband and focus solely on the immediate medical needs of the individual. While the immediate medical needs are paramount, failing to acknowledge and properly document the presence of suspected contraband constitutes a dereliction of duty. Phoenix Police Department policy, consistent with Arizona law, mandates the reporting and proper handling of all observed illegal substances. Ignoring it could lead to a failure to investigate a potential crime and a breach of departmental procedural requirements. A third incorrect approach is to dispose of the suspected contraband to avoid potential complications or to expedite the situation. This is a severe ethical and legal violation. Tampering with or destroying potential evidence is a criminal offense and a direct contravention of the oath of office and the legal obligations of a law enforcement officer. It undermines the justice system and erodes public trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes scene integrity, adherence to policy, and consultation with superiors. This involves a rapid assessment of the situation, identifying immediate threats to life and safety, followed by steps to preserve the scene and any potential evidence. Notification of supervisors and specialized units should be an immediate priority once the scene is stabilized. This layered approach ensures that all aspects of the incident are addressed appropriately, legally, and ethically, safeguarding both the investigation and the rights of all involved. Question 4. Process analysis reveals a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee observes an individual pacing erratically near a public park entrance late at night, muttering to themselves and occasionally gesturing towards the empty park. The trainee is on routine patrol and has no prior information about this individual. What is the most appropriate initial risk assessment and response strategy for the trainee to employ? Option A. Immediately approach the individual and demand they stop pacing and explain their behavior, preparing to use physical restraint if they do not comply. Option B. Observe the individual from a safe distance, attempt to make verbal contact to assess their well-being and intentions, and consider the surrounding environment for potential risks before deciding on further action. Option C. Continue the patrol route without engaging, assuming the individual is not posing a direct threat to anyone. Option D. Radio dispatch to request backup and initiate a high-risk stop based solely on the individual's unusual behavior. The correct answer is B. Observe the individual from a safe distance, attempt to make verbal contact to assess their well-being and intentions, and consider the surrounding environment for potential risks before deciding on further action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee because it requires immediate judgment under pressure, balancing the need for swift action with the imperative to adhere to departmental policy and legal statutes. The trainee must assess a situation that could escalate, potentially impacting public safety and departmental integrity, without the benefit of extensive experience or direct supervision. The risk of misinterpreting the situation or acting outside established protocols is significant, necessitating a robust understanding of risk assessment principles as applied to law enforcement. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic approach to risk assessment that prioritizes de-escalation and information gathering before resorting to more forceful measures. This approach involves observing the subject's behavior, assessing the immediate environment for potential threats or hazards, and considering the subject's apparent state of mind and intent. The trainee should then attempt to verbally engage the individual to understand their situation and de-escalate any perceived tension. This aligns with the Phoenix Police Department's training emphasis on community policing, procedural justice, and the use of force continuum, which mandates that officers exhaust all reasonable de-escalation tactics before considering physical intervention. The Arizona revised statutes, particularly those pertaining to lawful detention and the use of force, also underscore the importance of reasonable suspicion and proportionality in law enforcement actions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately assume the individual is a threat and initiate a physical apprehension without further observation or attempt at communication. This fails to meet the threshold for reasonable suspicion required by Arizona law for detention and could lead to an unwarranted use of force, violating departmental policy and civil rights. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the individual, assuming they pose no immediate threat. This neglects the officer's duty to investigate suspicious circumstances and could allow a potentially dangerous situation to develop unnoticed, creating a risk to public safety and failing to uphold the department's proactive policing mandate. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the individual's appearance or demeanor without attempting to gather more information or assess the context. This is a form of profiling and is ethically unsound, as it can lead to biased decision-making and discriminatory practices, which are contrary to the principles of equal protection under the law and departmental values. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with situational awareness and threat assessment. This involves observing, listening, and analyzing the environment and the individual's behavior. The next step is to consider available resources and departmental policies, particularly those related to de-escalation and the use of force. Communication should be prioritized to gather information and attempt to resolve the situation peacefully. If de-escalation is unsuccessful and a threat persists, officers must then consider the minimum level of force necessary to control the situation, always in accordance with legal statutes and departmental guidelines. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a citizen has reported observing an individual matching a suspect description from a recent bulletin loitering near a park entrance in Phoenix, Arizona. The citizen expresses significant concern for public safety. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee? Option A. Proceed to the park entrance to observe the individual from a discreet distance. Gather further information from other park patrons if available, and assess the situation objectively before taking any action. Option B. Immediately approach the individual and detain them based on the citizen's report and the matching description, prioritizing the citizen's expressed safety concerns. Option C. Advise the citizen that the department will monitor the situation and ask them to call back if the individual engages in any overt criminal activity. Option D. Contact dispatch to request immediate backup and prepare for a high-risk apprehension due to the citizen's expressed fear for public safety. The correct answer is A. Proceed to the park entrance to observe the individual from a discreet distance, gather further information from other park patrons if available, and assess the situation objectively before taking any action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an officer trainee to balance immediate public safety concerns with the procedural integrity of an investigation. The trainee must recognize the potential for bias and the importance of objective evidence gathering, even when faced with a seemingly straightforward situation. A hasty or prejudiced approach could compromise the investigation and lead to an unjust outcome. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic and objective approach to risk assessment, prioritizing the collection of verifiable evidence over initial assumptions. This aligns with the Phoenix Police Department's commitment to fair and impartial law enforcement, as outlined in their training manuals, and the Arizona revised statutes concerning evidence handling and due process. The correct approach focuses on gathering factual information, interviewing witnesses impartially, and documenting all observations without prejudgment. This ensures that any subsequent actions are based on solid evidence, upholding the principles of justice and accountability. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying heavily on the initial witness statement without independent verification. This fails to acknowledge the potential for witness bias, misinterpretation, or even deliberate misinformation. Ethically, it violates the principle of treating all individuals with fairness and not making assumptions about guilt or innocence based on a single account. Legally, it could lead to the collection of inadmissible evidence if the initial assessment is flawed. Another incorrect approach is to immediately escalate enforcement actions based solely on the perceived threat described by the witness. This bypasses the crucial step of corroborating the information and assessing the actual level of risk objectively. Such an approach could lead to an overreaction, potentially violating an individual's rights and creating unnecessary conflict, which is contrary to the department's de-escalation training and community policing philosophy. A further incorrect approach is to dismiss the situation as low risk without conducting any preliminary investigation or observation. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to adhere to standard operating procedures for responding to potential incidents. It neglects the responsibility to ensure public safety and could allow a genuine threat to go unaddressed, which is a direct contravention of an officer's duty. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with objective information gathering. This involves actively seeking and verifying facts, considering multiple perspectives, and assessing risks based on concrete evidence rather than assumptions or initial impressions. Adherence to departmental policy, ethical guidelines, and relevant state laws is paramount throughout the process. When faced with uncertainty, the professional course of action is to proceed with caution, thoroughness, and a commitment to impartiality. Question 6. Process analysis reveals a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee observing an individual exhibiting agitated behavior and pacing erratically near a public park entrance. The individual is alone, and no immediate threats are apparent to others. The trainee is on routine patrol and has not received any specific dispatch regarding this individual. Considering the principles of risk assessment and departmental guidelines for Phoenix, which of the following actions best represents a professional and legally sound initial response? Option A. Observe the individual from a safe distance, noting their behavior, demeanor, and any potential environmental factors that might contribute to the situation, while remaining prepared to intervene if a clear threat emerges or a violation of law becomes evident. Option B. Continue the patrol route without engaging, assuming the individual's behavior is not a direct concern for law enforcement at this time. Option C. Immediately approach the individual and demand to know their purpose for being in the area, initiating a direct confrontation to ascertain their intentions. Option D. Radio dispatch to request backup and initiate a high-risk stop based on the observed agitated behavior without further direct observation. Correct answer is A. Observe the individual from a safe distance, noting their behavior, demeanor, and any potential environmental factors that might contribute to the situation, while remaining prepared to intervene if a clear threat emerges or a violation of law becomes evident. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee because it requires immediate judgment under pressure, balancing the need for swift action with the imperative to adhere to departmental policy and legal statutes. The trainee must assess a situation that could escalate, potentially impacting public safety and departmental integrity, without the benefit of extensive experience or immediate supervisory guidance. The risk of misinterpreting the situation or acting outside established protocols is high, necessitating a robust understanding of risk assessment principles as applied to law enforcement. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic approach to risk assessment that prioritizes de-escalation and information gathering before resorting to more forceful measures. This approach involves observing the subject's behavior, assessing the immediate environment for potential threats or escape routes, and considering the presence of bystanders. It requires the trainee to mentally, or verbally, if possible, evaluate the level of threat posed by the individual and determine if their actions constitute a violation of Arizona revised statutes or Phoenix Police Department general orders. This methodical evaluation allows for a more informed and proportionate response, aligning with the department's commitment to lawful and ethical policing. The justification lies in the principle of proportionality, in the use of force and the duty to protect both the public and the individual, as outlined in departmental training and state law concerning lawful stops and arrests. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately assuming the individual is a threat and initiating a high-level intervention, such as a physical apprehension, without sufficient observation or assessment. This fails to adhere to the principle of reasonable suspicion required for stops and the probable cause needed for arrests under Arizona law. It risks an unlawful detention or use of force, leading to civil liability and departmental sanctions. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the situation entirely, assuming it is not the trainee's concern or that it will resolve itself. This neglects the officer's duty to protect and serve the public and to uphold the law. It demonstrates a failure to recognize potential risks to public safety and a dereliction of professional responsibility, which could have severe consequences if the situation escalates due to inaction. A third incorrect approach involves relying solely on intuition or a gut feeling without grounding the assessment in observable facts or departmental policy. While instinct can play a role, it must be supported by objective evidence and a structured risk assessment process. Acting purely on a hunch, without a clear rationale based on observed behavior or environmental factors, can lead to biased decision-making and actions that are not legally justifiable or ethically sound. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with situational awareness, followed by a rapid but thorough assessment of risks and potential threats. This assessment should be guided by established departmental policies and relevant state statutes. The trainee should consider the totality of the circumstances, including the individual's behavior, the environment, and any available intelligence. If a threat is identified, the response should be proportionate to the perceived risk, with a preference for de-escalation and communication. Documentation of the assessment and the subsequent actions is crucial for accountability and review. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee to assess a situation where they observe individuals acting suspiciously near a parked vehicle in a dimly lit alleyway, with one individual appearing to be concealing an object under their jacket. What is the most appropriate initial approach for the trainee to take? Option A. Ignore the situation as it does not pose an immediate, direct threat to the trainee's personal safety. Option B. Proceed to call for backup and wait for a supervisor to arrive before taking any action or making any observations. Option C. Cautiously observe the individuals from a safe distance, noting their actions and the vehicle's description, while simultaneously preparing to radio for backup and report the suspicious activity. Option D. Immediately approach the individuals aggressively to demand an explanation for their presence and actions. The correct answer is C. Cautiously observe the individuals from a safe distance, noting their actions and the vehicle's description, while simultaneously preparing to radio for backup and report the suspicious activity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee because it requires balancing immediate public safety concerns with the procedural integrity of an investigation. The trainee must make a judgment call under pressure, considering the potential risks associated with both action and inaction, while adhering to departmental policies and legal statutes governing evidence collection and public interaction. The urgency of the situation, coupled with the potential for harm, necessitates a careful and informed risk assessment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing immediate safety while initiating a documented, lawful investigative process. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Phoenix Police Department's core mission to protect and serve the community by addressing imminent threats. Simultaneously, it respects the legal framework for evidence preservation and investigation, ensuring that any actions taken are justifiable and do not compromise future legal proceedings. This method upholds both public safety and due process, which are fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations for law enforcement officers in Arizona. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly confronting the individuals without first assessing the immediate threat level or attempting to gather more information. This could escalate the situation unnecessarily, potentially endangering the officer and the public, and may lead to the loss of valuable information or evidence if the individuals flee. It fails to demonstrate a measured risk assessment and could violate departmental guidelines on de-escalation and tactical approaches. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the situation entirely due to a lack of immediate personal danger. This is professionally unacceptable, as it abdicates the officer's duty to protect the public and investigate potential criminal activity. It demonstrates a failure to assess the broader community risk and a disregard for the sworn responsibility to respond to suspicious circumstances. A third incorrect approach is to immediately call for backup and wait indefinitely without any preliminary observation or assessment. While backup is often crucial, a complete lack of initial assessment could lead to a delayed response to a rapidly evolving situation, potentially allowing harm to occur or evidence to be destroyed. It represents an over-reliance on procedure, without exercising independent professional judgment in the initial moments. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a rapid assessment of the immediate threat to public safety. This should be followed by a consideration of available resources and departmental policy regarding suspicious activity. The decision should then be made to either de-escalate, gather more information, request specific assistance, or take immediate action, always with a focus on lawful procedure and the preservation of evidence. This iterative process ensures that actions are proportionate to the perceived risk and aligned with legal and ethical standards. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, responding to a call regarding a disturbance, observes what appears to be a small bag of illegal narcotics lying in plain view on a public sidewalk near the disturbance. The trainee is concerned about the immediate safety of the public in the area due to the ongoing disturbance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the trainee to take regarding the observed item? Option A. Dispose of the suspected narcotics discreetly to avoid further complications with the ongoing disturbance. Option B. Secure the immediate area around the item and radio for a supervisor and the evidence unit to respond to the scene for proper collection and processing. Option C. Immediately collect the suspected narcotics and place them in their patrol vehicle for safekeeping while they address the disturbance. Option D. Leave the suspected narcotics on the sidewalk, but keep a visual watch on it from a safe distance while waiting for backup to arrive. The correct answer is B. Secure the immediate area around the item and radio for a supervisor and the evidence unit to respond to the scene for proper collection and processing. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee due to the inherent tension between immediate public safety concerns and the procedural requirements of evidence handling. The trainee must balance the urgency of a potential threat with the need to preserve the integrity of evidence, which is critical for successful prosecution and maintaining public trust in law enforcement. Failure to properly handle evidence can lead to its exclusion from court, jeopardizing cases and undermining the justice system. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the scene and immediately notifying a supervisor and the evidence unit. This approach is correct because it adheres to established protocols for evidence management, as outlined in the Arizona Revised Statutes and the Phoenix Police Department's General Orders. These regulations mandate that trained personnel handle evidence to ensure its chain of custody is maintained and its admissibility in court is not compromised. By involving supervisors and the evidence unit, the trainee ensures that the evidence is collected, documented, and preserved according to legal standards, while also allowing for immediate assessment of the ongoing threat by experienced officers. This prioritizes both public safety and the integrity of the investigation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately collect the suspected contraband without proper documentation or notification. This violates departmental procedures and state statutes regarding evidence handling. It risks contaminating the evidence, breaking the chain of custody, and making it inadmissible in court. This action prioritizes a perceived immediate need over established legal and procedural safeguards. Another incorrect approach is to leave the suspected contraband unattended at the scene while waiting for a supervisor, without any attempt to secure or document its presence. This creates a risk of the evidence being lost, tampered with, or destroyed, which would severely hinder the investigation and potentially allow a suspect to evade justice. It demonstrates a lack of proactive evidence preservation. A third incorrect approach is to dispose of the suspected contraband on the spot, believing it to be minor. This is a severe ethical and legal failure. It constitutes destruction of potential evidence, which can have serious consequences for the officer and the department, including internal affairs investigations and potential criminal charges. It bypasses the entire legal process of evidence collection and prosecution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal statutes and departmental policies while effectively addressing immediate public safety needs. This involves a systematic approach. First, assess the immediate threat to public safety. Second, secure the scene to prevent further harm or compromise. Third, notify appropriate personnel, supervisors, specialized units, who are trained in specific procedures like evidence handling. And fourth, follow established protocols for documentation and evidence collection. This layered approach ensures that all critical aspects of the situation are addressed responsibly and legally. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, while on routine patrol in a residential neighborhood, is flagged down by a concerned citizen who claims to have witnessed a suspicious activity that may constitute a crime. The citizen is eager to provide details immediately. What is the most appropriate course of action for the trainee to take in this situation? Option A. Dismiss the citizen's concerns due to the lack of immediate observable evidence. Option B. Immediately take detailed notes of the alleged incident and the citizen's account at the scene. Option C. Provide the citizen with the direct contact information of the detective assigned to similar cases. Option D. Document the citizen's willingness to provide information and their contact details, then inform them that an investigating officer will follow up. The correct answer is D. Document the citizen's willingness to provide information and their contact details, then inform them that an investigating officer will follow up. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee because it involves balancing the immediate need for information with the established legal and ethical protocols for evidence handling and community interaction. The trainee must recognize that their actions, even with good intentions, can compromise an investigation if not conducted within the proper framework. This requires careful judgment to avoid prejudicing a case or violating individual rights. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves documenting the citizen's willingness to provide information and their contact details, then informing them that an investigating officer will follow up. This approach is correct because it respects the citizen's desire to assist while adhering to the established procedures for handling potential evidence and witness statements. It ensures that the information is collected by the appropriate personnel, who are trained in proper documentation and chain of custody, thereby maintaining the integrity of any potential investigation. This aligns with the Arizona Revised Statutes concerning the collection and preservation of evidence and the Phoenix Police Department's standard operating procedures regarding citizen interactions and initial incident reporting. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately take detailed notes of the alleged incident and the citizen's account at the scene. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the proper investigative channels. The trainee is not the designated investigator for this type of incident, and their notes may not meet the evidentiary standards required for a formal report, potentially compromising the investigation. Furthermore, it could lead to the trainee inadvertently making promises or commitments they are not authorized to make. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the citizen's concerns due to the lack of immediate observable evidence. This is professionally unacceptable as it fails to acknowledge the citizen's right to report potential criminal activity and could lead to a missed investigative opportunity. Every report, regardless of initial appearance, warrants proper documentation and assessment by the appropriate authorities. This approach demonstrates a lack of diligence and could erode public trust. A further incorrect approach is to provide the citizen with the direct contact information of the detective assigned to similar cases. This is professionally unacceptable because it violates departmental protocols for information dissemination and case management. It could lead to unauthorized communication, potential witness tampering, or the disclosure of sensitive investigative details to individuals not directly involved in the official investigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal requirements. This involves 1. Identifying the nature of the situation and the trainee's role. 2. Recalling relevant departmental policies and state laws. 3. Assessing the potential impact of any action on the investigation and public trust. 4. Communicating clearly and professionally with the involved parties. 5. Escalating or referring the matter to the appropriate personnel or department as per procedure. Question 10. Governance review demonstrates that the Phoenix Police Department is considering the acquisition of new body-worn cameras. The proposed system has an initial purchase price of $750,000. Annual maintenance and software licensing fees are estimated at $150,000 per year. Training for all officers is projected to cost $50,000. The department estimates that the new cameras will reduce evidence processing time by an average of 10 minutes per incident, and there are approximately 15,000 incidents per year requiring such processing. If the average fully burdened cost of an officer's time is $60 per hour, and the expected lifespan of the equipment is 5 years, which of the following approaches best justifies the acquisition based on a financial risk assessment? Option A. Prioritize the acquisition of the system with the most advanced features, assuming that superior technology will inherently provide greater long-term value, regardless of detailed cost-benefit calculations. Option B. Focus on the initial purchase price of $750,000 and compare it to the estimated annual savings from reduced evidence processing time. Option C. Rely on informal feedback from a small group of patrol officers who have expressed enthusiasm for the new technology to justify the expenditure. Option D. Calculate the total cost of ownership over 5 years and compare it to the total quantifiable benefits derived from reduced evidence processing time over the same period, determining if the benefits outweigh the costs. The correct answer is D. Calculate the total cost of ownership over 5 years and compare it to the total quantifiable benefits derived from reduced evidence processing time over the same period, determining if the benefits outweigh the costs. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the trainee to balance the immediate need for resources with the long-term implications of financial strain on the department. Miscalculating the cost-effectiveness of a proposed solution can lead to inefficient allocation of taxpayer funds, potentially impacting operational readiness and officer safety. The trainee must demonstrate an understanding of financial prudence and the ability to apply analytical tools to justify resource requests, adhering to the fiscal responsibilities inherent in public service. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis that quantifies both the expected costs and the anticipated benefits of the new equipment. This includes calculating the total acquisition cost, ongoing maintenance, training expenses, and potential savings from increased efficiency or reduced downtime. The trainee should then compare this to the current operational costs and the quantifiable benefits, e.g., reduced response times, improved evidence collection. This approach is correct because it aligns with principles of responsible financial management and accountability, ensuring that public funds are used effectively and that investments demonstrably improve departmental capabilities. It directly addresses the need for data-driven decision-making, a cornerstone of efficient public administration, and a likely expectation within the Phoenix Police Department's operational guidelines. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to focus solely on the initial purchase price of the equipment without considering long-term operational costs. This fails to account for maintenance, training, and potential obsolescence, leading to an incomplete financial picture and potentially underestimating the true cost of ownership. This is ethically problematic as it can lead to budget overruns and a misallocation of resources. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize the most advanced or feature-rich equipment without a clear justification for its necessity based on operational needs. This can result in unnecessary expenditure on capabilities that are not utilized, violating the principle of fiscal responsibility and potentially diverting funds from more critical needs. A third incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few officers regarding the equipment's benefits without rigorous data collection or analysis. This subjective assessment lacks the objectivity required for sound financial decision-making and can lead to investments based on preference rather than demonstrable need and return on investment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach resource allocation decisions by first clearly defining the problem or operational need. Then, they should identify potential solutions and gather data on the costs and benefits of each. A quantitative analysis, such as a cost-benefit ratio or a net present value calculation, should be performed to compare options. Finally, the decision should be made based on the option that provides the greatest value and best serves the department's mission, while adhering to all budgetary and ethical guidelines. Question 11. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, while on patrol in a residential neighborhood, observes an individual pacing back and forth on a sidewalk in front of a vacant house late at night, occasionally looking at their watch. What is the most appropriate initial risk assessment approach for the trainee to employ, adhering to Arizona law and Phoenix Police Department guidelines? Option A. Ignore the individual as they are not directly interacting with the vacant property and are not exhibiting overtly aggressive behavior. Option B. Radio dispatch to request backup and initiate a high-visibility approach to deter any potential criminal activity without further observation. Option C. Immediately approach the individual and question their presence and activities, assuming they are engaged in illicit behavior due to the late hour and location. Option D. Observe the individual's behavior from a safe distance, noting specific actions and environmental factors, and consult departmental general orders regarding suspicious activity and reasonable suspicion before considering any direct engagement. The correct answer is D. Observe the individual's behavior from a safe distance, noting specific actions and environmental factors, and consult departmental general orders regarding suspicious activity and reasonable suspicion before considering any direct engagement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee because it requires immediate judgment under pressure, balancing the need for swift action with the imperative to adhere to established departmental policies and legal statutes. Misinterpreting the situation or acting impulsively could lead to a violation of civil liberties, compromise an investigation, or result in unnecessary escalation, all of which carry significant consequences for the officer and the department. The trainee must demonstrate an understanding of risk assessment principles as applied to law enforcement situations within the specific legal framework of Arizona. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic approach to risk assessment that prioritizes gathering information and consulting established protocols before taking definitive action. This means observing the situation, noting specific details that indicate potential danger or criminal activity, and then cross-referencing these observations with departmental general orders and Arizona revised statutes concerning probable cause, reasonable suspicion, and use of force. This approach ensures that any subsequent actions are legally justifiable and procedurally sound, minimizing the risk of error and upholding the rights of all individuals involved. It aligns with the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board, ASPOST, guidelines for officer conduct, and the Phoenix Police Department's own policy manual, which emphasizes evidence-based decision-making. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately intervene based on a generalized feeling of unease or a vague suspicion without concrete observable facts. This bypasses the critical step of information gathering and objective assessment, potentially leading to an unwarranted stop or confrontation, which could violate an individual's Fourth Amendment rights as interpreted by Arizona law. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the word of a single, unverified source without attempting to corroborate their claims or assess their credibility. This can lead to acting on misinformation, which is a failure of due diligence and a potential violation of departmental policy, requiring objective evidence for investigative actions. A third incorrect approach is to escalate the situation by employing a show of force or making accusatory statements before a thorough assessment of the immediate threat level has been conducted. This demonstrates a lack of control and an improper application of risk assessment, potentially creating a dangerous situation where none existed and violating Phoenix Police Department policies on de-escalation and professional conduct. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with observation and information gathering, followed by an objective assessment of the situation against established legal standards and departmental policies. This includes identifying potential risks, evaluating the credibility of information, and considering the least intrusive means necessary to address the situation. When in doubt, consulting with a supervisor or senior officer is a crucial step in ensuring proper procedure is followed and risks are mitigated. Question 12. Process analysis reveals that Phoenix Police Department Officer Miller is on routine patrol in a quiet residential neighborhood at approximately 2:00 a.m. Officer Miller observes an individual standing near the entrance of a closed business, looking around frequently. The individual is not engaged in any overt criminal activity, nor is there any immediate indication of a threat to public safety. Officer Miller needs to determine the most appropriate and lawful course of action. Option A. Approach the individual and instruct them to leave the area, as their presence at this hour is unusual and potentially concerning. Option B. Maintain a safe distance, observe the individual's behavior and the surrounding environment, and be prepared to intervene only if a threat to public safety or evidence of criminal activity becomes apparent. Option C. Immediately call for backup and initiate a high-risk stop of the individual due to the late hour and the location near a closed business. Option D. Approach the individual directly to question their presence and intentions, aiming to de-escalate the situation by making their presence known. The correct answer is B. Maintain a safe distance, observe the individual's behavior and the surrounding environment, and be prepared to intervene only if a threat to public safety or evidence of criminal activity becomes apparent. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Officer Miller to balance immediate public safety concerns with the procedural integrity of an investigation. The pressure to act quickly to prevent potential harm must be weighed against the risk of compromising evidence or violating an individual's rights, which could jeopardize the entire case and erode public trust in the Phoenix Police Department. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions are both effective and lawful. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves Officer Miller immediately securing the scene and observing the individual's actions from a safe distance without direct engagement or confrontation. This approach is correct because it prioritizes officer safety and the preservation of potential evidence by allowing the situation to unfold naturally while maintaining a position to intervene if imminent danger arises. This aligns with the Arizona Revised Statutes regarding lawful observation and the general duty of peace officers to maintain public order and safety without unnecessary escalation. It respects the individual's right to be free from unwarranted intrusion until probable cause for intervention is established. Incorrect approaches analysis. Engaging the individual directly to question their presence and intentions, even with the intent to de-escalate, is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks escalating the situation unnecessarily, potentially leading to a confrontation that could endanger the officer, the individual, or the public. It also prematurely compromises the investigative integrity by alerting the subject to police awareness, potentially leading to the destruction or concealment of evidence. This action could be seen as an unlawful stop or detention if not supported by reasonable suspicion, violating Fourth Amendment principles. Immediately calling for backup and initiating a high-risk stop without observing any overt criminal activity or immediate threat is also professionally unacceptable. Backup is often prudent. Initiating a high-risk stop based solely on suspicion of loitering or unusual behavior, without more, could be an overreach of authority. This could lead to unnecessary fear and trauma for the individual, and could be challenged as an unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment if not justified by specific articulable facts indicating criminal activity or danger. Approaching the individual and asking them to leave the area without any articulable suspicion of wrongdoing is professionally unacceptable. This action constitutes a potential violation of the individual's right to freedom of movement and assembly. Unless there is a specific ordinance being violated or a clear and present danger, ordering someone to leave a public space without cause is not within the scope of lawful police duties and could lead to civil rights complaints. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a tiered approach to risk assessment and intervention. First, observe and gather information to establish reasonable suspicion or probable cause. Second, prioritize de-escalation and minimal intrusion. Third, if intervention is necessary, ensure it is lawful, proportionate to the observed threat, and conducted with due regard for individual rights and evidence preservation. The decision to escalate from observation to intervention must be based on evolving circumstances and concrete evidence of wrongdoing or imminent danger, consistent with Arizona law and constitutional protections. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that when encountering an individual exhibiting erratic behavior in a public area in Phoenix, Arizona, what is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for an officer trainee to employ? Option A. Observe the individual from a distance for an extended period, waiting for a clear, overt act of aggression before taking any action, even if the erratic behavior suggests an imminent threat. Option B. Rely on initial assumptions about the individual's intent based on their appearance or demeanor, and respond accordingly with a predetermined level of force. Option C. Conduct a rapid assessment of the individual's behavior, the environment, and any potential threats, then select a response that prioritizes de-escalation and minimizes risk, using force only when legally justified and necessary. Option D. Immediately approach the individual aggressively to assert authority and prevent any potential escalation, regardless of the specific behaviors observed. The correct answer is C. Conduct a rapid assessment of the individual's behavior, the environment, and any potential threats, then select a response that prioritizes de-escalation and minimizes risk, using force only when legally justified and necessary. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that assessing risk in law enforcement requires a nuanced understanding of potential threats and vulnerabilities, balanced against the resources available and the legal framework governing police actions. In Arizona, officers must operate within the strict confines of state statutes and departmental policies, which are designed to ensure public safety while protecting individual rights. This scenario is professionally challenging because it presents a situation where immediate action might seem warranted, but a hasty decision could lead to unintended consequences, including legal repercussions or harm to the public or the officer. The officer trainee must demonstrate an ability to move beyond instinct and apply a structured, risk-based approach to decision-making, adhering to established protocols. The best approach involves a systematic assessment of the immediate threat level, considering the totality of circumstances. This includes evaluating the suspect's behavior, the presence of weapons, the environment, and the potential for escalation. Based on this assessment, the officer trainee should then determine the most appropriate response that minimizes risk to all parties involved, prioritizing de-escalation and the use of force only when necessary, and in accordance with Arizona revised statutes regarding the use of force. This aligns with the Arizona Peace Officer Standards and Training Board ASPOST guidelines, which emphasize lawful, ethical, and effective policing through continuous training and adherence to best practices in risk management, an approach that involves immediate, unverified assumptions about the suspect's intent, and a disproportionate response is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the legal standard of reasonable suspicion or probable cause, depending on the stage of the encounter, and could violate an individual's rights under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as interpreted by Arizona courts. Such an approach also disregards departmental policy on threat assessment and de-escalation, potentially leading to excessive force claims and undermining public trust. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to delay action indefinitely due to perceived ambiguity, even when a clear and present danger exists. This inaction can create a greater risk to the public and the officer by allowing a volatile situation to worsen. It fails to uphold the officer's duty to protect and serve, and can be seen as a dereliction of duty, potentially violating Arizona revised statutes related to the duties of peace officers. Finally, an approach that relies solely on personal feelings or biases rather than objective, observable facts is fundamentally flawed. This is ethically unsound and directly contradicts the principles of impartial policing mandated by ASPOST and the Arizona Constitution. Such subjective decision-making can lead to discriminatory practices and erode the integrity of the police department. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough observation and assessment of the situation, followed by an analysis of potential risks and legal parameters. This should then lead to the selection of the least intrusive, yet effective, course of action. Continuous training in de-escalation techniques and the legal standards for use of force, as provided by ASPOST, is crucial for developing this critical judgment. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, while on patrol in a residential neighborhood, observes two individuals loitering near parked vehicles late at night, appearing to be looking into the windows of the cars. The trainee has not yet observed any overt criminal acts. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the trainee to take? Option A. Attempt to conduct a pat-down search of the individuals for weapons based on the trainee's feeling that something is wrong. Option B. Immediately report the suspicious activity to dispatch, providing a detailed description of the individuals, their actions, and the location. Option C. Continue patrolling and ignore the individuals, assuming they are not engaged in any illegal activity. Option D. Directly approach the individuals and demand to know what they are doing, without first contacting dispatch. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the suspicious activity to dispatch, providing a detailed description of the individuals, their actions, and the location. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee due to the inherent tension between the need for immediate action in a potential public safety situation and the strict adherence to departmental policy and legal protocols. The trainee must balance the urgency of the observed behavior with the requirement for proper authorization and evidence gathering, ensuring that actions taken are both effective and lawful, thereby avoiding potential civil liability or internal disciplinary action. The pressure to act quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise procedural integrity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately reporting the observed suspicious activity to dispatch, providing a clear and concise description of the individuals, their actions, and the location. This approach is correct because it initiates the proper chain of command, allowing for trained supervisors and other units to assess the situation and authorize further investigation or intervention, according to established Phoenix Police Department policies and Arizona revised statutes regarding reasonable suspicion and probable cause. This ensures that any subsequent actions are legally sound and procedurally compliant, prioritizing officer safety and public trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly confronting the individuals and demanding identification without a clear articulable suspicion of criminal activity. This is professionally unacceptable because it can be construed as an unlawful stop or detention under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and Arizona case law, potentially leading to a violation of civil rights and the suppression of any evidence obtained. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the activity, assuming it is not a concern. This is professionally unacceptable as it represents a failure to uphold the duty to protect and serve the public. Ignoring potentially criminal behavior could lead to a missed opportunity to prevent a crime or apprehend a suspect, and could also result in departmental reprimand for dereliction of duty. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to conduct a full search of the individuals based solely on the trainee's subjective feeling of unease. This is professionally unacceptable as it violates the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. A search requires probable cause or a specific, articulable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous, which is not established by the described scenario alone. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes observation, reporting, and adherence to policy. When encountering suspicious activity, the first step is to gather information and report it to the appropriate authority. This allows for a coordinated and lawful response. If a situation escalates and requires immediate intervention, officers must be able to articulate the specific facts and circumstances that justify their actions under relevant legal standards, such as reasonable suspicion for a stop or probable cause for an arrest or search. This systematic approach ensures accountability, legality, and effectiveness in law enforcement duties. Question 15. The control framework reveals that a Phoenix Police Department officer trainee, while responding to a call regarding a disturbance at a residence in Arizona, observes a small, unmarked baggie containing a white powdery substance in plain view on a kitchen counter during a lawful sweep for other individuals. The trainee is aware that the substance appears consistent with illegal narcotics. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the trainee? Option A. Place the baggie in their personal locker for safekeeping until the end of their shift. Option B. Secure the baggie, meticulously document its location and appearance, and immediately notify a supervisor of the discovery. Option C. Conduct a preliminary field test on the substance to confirm its identity before taking further action. Option D. Dispose of the baggie discreetly to avoid complicating the initial response to the disturbance call. The correct answer is B. Secure the baggie, meticulously document its location and appearance, and immediately notify a supervisor of the discovery. Explanation. The control framework reveals a critical juncture in the Phoenix Police Department's operational readiness. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an officer trainee to balance immediate operational needs with established departmental protocols and the legal framework governing evidence handling in Arizona. The pressure to quickly process a scene, especially one involving potential contraband, can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the investigation and violate constitutional rights. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions are lawful, ethical, and in adherence to the Phoenix Police Department's Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, and Arizona revised statutes concerning search and seizure. The best approach involves meticulously documenting the discovery of the suspected contraband and securing it in a manner that preserves its evidentiary value and chain of custody, while also immediately notifying a supervisor. This aligns with the fundamental principles of due process and the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as interpreted by Arizona courts, which mandate that searches and seizures be reasonable and conducted under proper legal authority. Departmental SOPs, which are designed to implement these legal requirements, dictate specific procedures for handling evidence, including the requirement for supervisory notification and proper logging to maintain the chain of custody. This method ensures that any subsequent legal proceedings are not jeopardized by procedural errors or allegations of mishandling evidence. An approach that involves immediate disposal of the suspected contraband without proper documentation or supervisory notification is ethically and legally flawed. This bypasses critical steps in evidence preservation and chain of custody, which are essential for its admissibility in court. Such an action could be construed as tampering with evidence or obstruction of justice, violating Arizona revised statutes and departmental ethics. Another unacceptable approach is to conduct a preliminary field test of the suspected contraband without proper authorization or adherence to departmental policy regarding the use of such tests. This could lead to the destruction or alteration of evidence before it is properly logged and secured, potentially rendering it inadmissible. Furthermore, it may violate departmental SOPs regarding the chain of custody and the proper handling of controlled substances. Finally, an approach that involves storing the suspected contraband in the trainee's personal locker without logging it or notifying a supervisor is also professionally unacceptable. This creates a significant break in the chain of custody and raises serious questions about the integrity of the evidence. It directly contravenes departmental SOPs designed to prevent evidence tampering and ensure accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal mandates and departmental policies. This involves a step-by-step process. First, assess the situation and identify potential evidence. Second, secure the evidence in a manner that preserves its integrity. Third, meticulously document all actions taken. Fourth, notify appropriate supervisory personnel. And fifth, follow established protocols for evidence logging and transfer. This systematic approach ensures that all actions are defensible, ethical, and legally sound. Question 16. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the documentation of a seized item's transfer within the Phoenix Police Department's evidence log. As a police officer trainee, you observe this discrepancy during your review of recent case files. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Discuss the discrepancy with fellow trainees or officers informally to gauge their opinions before taking any action. Option B. Immediately report the observed discrepancy to your supervising officer, detailing the specific issue and requesting guidance on corrective measures. Option C. Disregard the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor clerical error that will not impact the case. Option D. Attempt to correct the evidence log entry yourself to reflect what you believe to be the accurate transfer, without informing your supervisor. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the observed discrepancy to your supervising officer, detailing the specific issue and requesting guidance on corrective measures. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to the Phoenix Police Department's established procedures for evidence handling and chain of custody. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an officer trainee to balance the immediate need to address a potential procedural error with the imperative to maintain the integrity of an ongoing investigation and the chain of custody for critical evidence. Missteps can have severe consequences, including the suppression of evidence in court, damage to the department's reputation, and potential disciplinary action. The correct approach involves immediate, transparent, and documented communication with the supervising officer. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the identified discrepancy in a manner that upholds departmental policy and legal standards for evidence integrity. By reporting the issue to the supervisor, the trainee ensures that any necessary corrective actions are taken under the guidance of experienced personnel, who can then assess the situation and implement the appropriate remedial steps in accordance with Arizona revised statutes and Phoenix Police Department general orders concerning evidence management. This preserves the chain of custody and demonstrates a commitment to procedural accuracy and accountability. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the discrepancy independently without informing a supervisor. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses established oversight mechanisms designed to ensure accuracy and prevent unauthorized alterations or mishandling of evidence. It also fails to document the corrective action, thereby compromising the integrity of the chain of custody record and potentially creating grounds for evidence suppression. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy and proceed as if no issue occurred. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It demonstrates a disregard for departmental policy and the legal requirements surrounding evidence, which are fundamental to the justice system. Such inaction could lead to the compromised evidence being presented in court, undermining the prosecution and violating the public trust. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the discrepancy informally with colleagues without reporting it through the proper channels. While seemingly less direct than ignoring it, this still fails to address the issue formally and document any necessary corrective actions. It also risks the spread of misinformation or the perception of a cover-up, further eroding trust and procedural integrity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and procedures, transparency, and seeking guidance from supervisors when uncertainties arise. This involves a commitment to the principles of accountability and the preservation of evidence integrity at all stages of an investigation. When an audit finding or personal observation reveals a potential procedural deviation, the immediate steps should be to identify the relevant policy, assess the potential impact, and report the finding to the appropriate authority for resolution. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates that a significant volume of citizen contact data is being collected by Phoenix Police Department officers, but the data retention and access policies appear to be inconsistently applied, raising potential concerns under Arizona revised statutes regarding privacy and public records. Which of the following implementation strategies best addresses this challenge? Option A. Rely on the existing informal practices of officers to manage data, assuming that most data is collected and handled appropriately without formal review. Option B. Focus solely on upgrading the technical capabilities of the monitoring system to flag potential policy violations without addressing the underlying legal and procedural gaps in data management. Option C. Instruct officers to cease collecting all non-essential citizen contact data until a new policy can be drafted, potentially hindering investigative efforts and departmental oversight. Option D. Develop and implement a comprehensive data governance policy that clearly defines the scope of data collection, establishes strict retention schedules aligned with Arizona revised statutes, and outlines a secure, legally compliant process for accessing and responding to public records requests. The correct answer is D. Develop and implement a comprehensive data governance policy that clearly defines the scope of data collection, establishes strict retention schedules aligned with Arizona revised statutes, and outlines a secure, legally compliant process for accessing and responding to public records requests. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical implementation challenge in ensuring compliance with Arizona revised statutes, (ARS), related to law enforcement data privacy and public records. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for effective departmental oversight and accountability with the strict legal requirements governing the collection, storage, and dissemination of sensitive information. Officer trainees must understand that failure to adhere to these statutes can lead to legal repercussions for the department and individual officers, as well as erode public trust. The best approach involves a proactive and legally compliant data management strategy. This includes establishing clear policies and procedures for data collection that align with ARS Ensuring all data collected is necessary for legitimate law enforcement purposes, and implementing robust security measures to protect against unauthorized access or breaches. Furthermore, the department must have a defined process for handling public records, requests that strictly adheres to ARS disclosure requirements, redacting sensitive information where legally mandated. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal obligations outlined in ARS, prioritizing compliance, data integrity, and the protection of individual privacy rights. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize immediate access to all collected data for training purposes, without considering the legal limitations on its use and dissemination. This fails to acknowledge the specific requirements of ARS regarding data privacy and public access, potentially leading to unauthorized disclosure or misuse of sensitive information. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the monitoring system's findings, assuming the data collected is inherently compliant. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively identify and rectify potential statutory violations. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of the monitoring system without integrating legal compliance and policy review is also flawed, as technology alone cannot guarantee adherence to legal frameworks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the relevant legal landscape, ARS in this case. This involves consulting legal counsel, developing clear, actionable policies, and providing comprehensive training to all personnel. Regular audits and reviews of data handling practices, informed by monitoring systems, are crucial for identifying and mitigating risks. The ultimate goal is to foster a culture of compliance where legal obligations are understood and integrated into daily operations. Question 18. The control framework reveals a critical implementation challenge for the Phoenix Police Department regarding the secure and documented handling of seized items. Officer Miller has apprehended a suspect and seized several items believed to be related to a drug trafficking operation. He needs to ensure these items are properly managed to maintain their integrity and admissibility in court. Which of the following actions best upholds the legal and ethical standards for evidence handling in Arizona? Option A. Delay submitting the seized items to the evidence locker for 2 days while he completes other urgent tasks, intending to log them all at once. Option B. Immediately secure the seized items in the department's designated evidence locker, meticulously documenting each item's description, the date and time of seizure, the location of seizure, and the officer responsible for the seizure, and initiating the chain of custody log. Option C. Hand the seized items to a fellow officer who is heading to the evidence locker, assuming they will log it in later, and make a mental note of the items. Option D. Store the seized items in the trunk of his patrol car until the end of his shift, planning to submit them to the evidence locker when convenient. The correct answer is B. Immediately secure the seized items in the department's designated evidence locker, meticulously documenting each item's description, the date and time of seizure, the location of seizure, and the officer responsible for the seizure, and initiating the chain of custody log. Explanation. The control framework reveals a critical implementation challenge for the Phoenix Police Department concerning the proper handling of evidence. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the integrity of investigations, the potential for successful prosecution, and public trust in law enforcement. Mismanagement of evidence can lead to cases being dismissed, wrongful convictions, and significant damage to the department's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to established protocols and legal standards. The best approach involves meticulously documenting the chain of custody for all seized items, including the date, time, location of seizure, the officer seizing the item, and any subsequent transfers of possession. This documentation must be contemporaneous with the actions taken and stored securely within the department's evidence management system. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with Arizona Revised Statutes, A.R.S. Section 13-3905, which mandates the preservation and proper handling of evidence, and A.R.S. Section 13-3906, which outlines the requirements for a chain of custody. Ethically, it upholds the principle of due process by ensuring that evidence is handled in a manner that preserves its integrity and admissibility in court. thereby protecting the rights of both the accused and the victim. An approach that involves informal handoffs of evidence between officers without proper logging is professionally unacceptable. This failure violates ARS Section 13-3905 and Section 13-3906 by breaking the chain of custody, making it impossible to prove the evidence was not tampered with or altered. This compromises the integrity of the evidence and can lead to its exclusion from court proceedings. Another unacceptable approach is to store seized items in an unsecured location, such as an officer's personal vehicle or desk, before formal submission to the evidence locker. This practice directly contravenes the security requirements stipulated by departmental policy, which are designed to prevent loss, theft, or contamination of evidence, as implicitly required by the need for evidence integrity under Arizona law. Finally, delaying the formal logging and submission of evidence to the evidence locker for several days without a valid and documented reason is also professionally unacceptable. This delay creates a significant gap in the chain of custody and increases the risk of evidence degradation or loss, thereby undermining its evidentiary value and violating the spirit and letter of Arizona's evidence handling statutes. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal mandates. This involves understanding the specific requirements of Arizona law regarding evidence handling, consulting departmental policies and procedures, and maintaining meticulous records at every step. When in doubt, officers should seek clarification from supervisors or the evidence custodian rather than deviating from established procedures. Question 19. The control framework reveals that during a routine traffic stop in Phoenix, Arizona, an officer trainee lawfully obtains information suggesting potential involvement in criminal activity unrelated to the initial infraction. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer trainee to take regarding this information? Option A. Disregard the information as it does not directly relate to the reason for the initial traffic stop. Option B. Immediately share the information with a supervisor verbally, requesting guidance on how to proceed without formal documentation. Option C. Discuss the information casually with other officers on patrol who are not involved in the investigation. Option D. Meticulously document the encounter and the information obtained, then submit it through the established departmental channels for review and potential follow-up by the appropriate investigative units. The correct answer is D. Meticulously document the encounter and the information obtained, then submit it through the established departmental channels for review and potential follow-up by the appropriate investigative units. Explanation. The control framework reveals a critical juncture in the Phoenix Police Department's operational integrity. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the immediate need for information against the established protocols designed to protect both the public and the integrity of investigations. Officer trainees must navigate the delicate balance between proactive policing and adherence to legal and ethical boundaries, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive information obtained during an encounter. The pressure to appear effective and to gather intelligence quickly can create a temptation to bypass proper procedures. The best approach involves meticulously documenting the encounter and the information obtained, then submitting it through the established departmental channels for review and potential follow-up by the appropriate investigative units. This method is correct because it upholds the principles of due process and accountability. Specifically, Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS, Section 13-3905 mandates that all information obtained through lawful means during an investigation be properly recorded and reported. Furthermore, the Phoenix Police Department's own general orders, particularly those concerning evidence handling and reporting, emphasize the importance of chain of custody and authorized dissemination of information. This approach ensures that intelligence is handled ethically, legally, and in a manner that supports a structured investigative process, preventing unauthorized disclosure or premature action based on incomplete or unverified information. An approach that involves immediately sharing the information with a supervisor outside of the formal reporting structure without proper documentation is incorrect. This bypasses established accountability mechanisms and risks the information being mishandled or misinterpreted, violates departmental procedures for information dissemination, and could compromise the integrity of any subsequent investigation by introducing an informal and undocumented chain of communication. Another incorrect approach is to disregard the information entirely because it does not directly pertain to the initial reason for the stop. This is a failure to recognize the potential value of all lawfully obtained information. Law enforcement officers have a duty to report any relevant information that may assist in preventing or solving crimes, as outlined in ARS Section 13-3901, which broadly covers the reporting of criminal activity. Ignoring such information could be seen as dereliction of duty. Finally, an approach that involves discussing the information casually with other officers not directly involved in the investigation, even if done in a seemingly informal manner, is also incorrect. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and violates departmental policies on the secure handling of sensitive information. Such actions can lead to the compromise of ongoing investigations and erode public trust. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a commitment to procedural justice and ethical conduct. Officer trainees should be trained to prioritize adherence to departmental policies and state statutes, even under pressure. A decision-making framework should involve 1. Identifying the relevant legal and departmental regulations. 2. Assessing the nature and potential significance of the information obtained. 3. Following the prescribed reporting and documentation procedures. And 4. Seeking clarification from supervisors or legal counsel if unsure about the proper course of action. Question 20. During the evaluation of a planned multi-hour tactical operation in Phoenix, Arizona, officers are tasked with estimating the total personnel hours required, including potential overtime. The operation is broken down into 4 distinct phases. Phase 1, briefing and deployment, estimated at 45 minutes. Phase 2, site reconnaissance, estimated at 1 hour and 15 minutes. Phase 3, execution of tactical maneuvers, estimated at 2 hours and 30 minutes. And Phase 4, post-operation debriefing and equipment return, estimated at 1 hour. If the standard hourly pay rate for officers is $35.00 and the overtime rate is 1.5 times the standard rate, and assuming the operation begins at 14:00 and must conclude by 20:00 for all officers to complete their regular shifts, what is the total estimated overtime cost for a team of 10 officers? Option A, $1,750.00. Option B, $1,312.50. Option C, $1,575.00. Option D, $1,050.00. Correct answer is B, $1,312.50. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement in Arizona, accurately estimating the time required for a critical operational task under pressure, with potential consequences for public safety and resource allocation. The need for precise calculation, especially when dealing with overtime and budgetary constraints, demands a methodical and informed approach. Miscalculations can lead to understaffing, increased costs, and potentially compromised response capabilities. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a systematic breakdown of the task into its constituent parts and applying realistic time estimates for each, factoring in potential delays. This aligns with principles of efficient resource management and responsible fiscal oversight, which are implicit in the operational guidelines of the Phoenix Police Department. By calculating the total estimated time and then determining the overtime hours needed based on standard pay rates, the department can accurately project costs and ensure adequate staffing. This method is grounded in logical progression and data-driven estimation, reflecting a professional commitment to accuracy and accountability. Incorrect approach is analysis. Estimating the total time by simply adding the minimum time for each step without considering potential delays or complexities is a flawed approach. This method ignores the inherent unpredictability of police work and can lead to underestimation, resulting in insufficient staffing and potential overtime budget overruns. Using a fixed overtime rate without first calculating the actual overtime hours required is also incorrect. This bypasses the necessary step of determining the duration of the overtime, making the calculation arbitrary and potentially inaccurate for budgeting purposes. Rounding up the estimated time to the nearest whole hour without a clear justification or calculation basis is an unprofessional shortcut. While aiming for a buffer is sometimes prudent, it should be based on a reasoned assessment of risk and potential delays, not an arbitrary rounding rule, and should be clearly justified within the departmental policy on overtime estimation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such calculations by first deconstructing the task into manageable components. For each component, they should estimate the time required, considering best case, worst case, and most likely scenarios. This allows for a more robust and realistic overall time estimate. Subsequently, they should calculate the actual overtime hours needed by subtracting regular duty hours from the total estimated operational time. Finally, they should apply the correct overtime pay rate to the calculated overtime hours to determine the financial impact. This structured, data-informed process ensures accuracy, accountability, and responsible resource management.